So, by a show of hands, who here has operated a firearm before? Okay, so the good majority of you. Rhetorical question: do you know what has brought us to where we're at now with them? With all of the negative press that firearms have been getting recently, I thought it would be a good time to discuss the progress that we have made over the many centuries that they've been a thing. I've personally always been interested in firearms due to my morbid curiosity in things that destroy other things. So I've done a lot of research into firearms both casually and for academic purposes. Today we're going to talk about what exactly a firearm is, and then their history from the most primitive of what can be considered a firearm through to the invention of the blasting cap, and then on to the invention of the automatic handgun. To start off, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives defines a firearm as any weapon, including a starter gun, which can be, will, or can be converted to fire a projectile by the means of an explosive. That would mean that the earliest firearms created in medieval China to fire arrows or shrapnel by means of black powder would meet those specifications. That design stayed around for a few hundred years until in the 13th century the first mechanical firearm came into fruition. That is the matchlock. The matchlock uses a match or wick to lower flame into a pool of powder on the side of the firearm, which will then light the main charge and expel the projectile. That design stayed around for yet another few centuries until in 1630, when one of the most well-known firearms styles from this era came about, the flintlock. The flintlock had a relatively similar composition to that of the matchlock. However, instead of a match, it used flint, which was then struck against the mechanism of the weapon, creating sparks and lighting powder. Following the trend, that design stayed around for yet another few centuries until shortly before the start of the Civil War, when the percussion cap came about. It is also known as the blasting cap, and it is a small metal cup that, when struck with a hard force, will explode, which then lends itself to firearm usage. Those were initially used in designs similar to the matchlock and flintlock, but were eventually adapted into more recognizable weapons, more modern use. One of the first of these, of the rifle style, is the Spencer repeating carbine. This was probably most notable for the time, impressive fire rate, managing to pull off about 20 to 30 rounds a minute. Not impressive now, but it was then. The decade in which this came out, the 1860s, ended up being a very good decade for firearms in general, producing the Spencer carbine, the Winchester rifle, and, my personal favorite, the Gatling gun. The Gatling gun used a mechanism which would automatically feed the rounds in and out, and rotate the barrels by means of a hand crank to prevent overheating. All of this allowed it to reach speeds of about 3,000 rounds per minute, putting the Spencer to shame. This did not maintain the status as one of the only automatics for too terribly long, as surprisingly, only 20 years later, the first automatic handgun was released. So, we've talked about what exactly a firearm is, what the earliest weapons that could be called firearms are, all the way up to the blasting cap, and then onward to the automatic handgun. I hope that with this information, next time you go to operate one of these magnificent and dangerous weapons, that you will take a moment to consider the hard work, ingenuity, and thoughts that have gone into bringing